What is going on, YouTube? The Assist Man. I'm coming back at you guys with another Neverwinter YouTube video. Now, it's been a long time coming since I wanted to actually make this video. A lot of you guys have been asking me about my Trickster Rogue builds and things that I use and so on and so forth. And I actually had a build video that I put up, well, actually that I did, but it was from like last month and a lot of things have changed, so I just decided to just redo it all over again. So this is going to be my official build video for mod 14 for the Trickster Rogue class. Basically what I use. Most of the stuff is probably going to be best in slot. Some of it's not going to be. It's just the way that I personally like to play. So this is going to be a longer video because there's a lot to cover, but I'm going to try my best to keep it as short as possible. If you guys haven't left a thumbs up like on the videos yet, man, I greatly appreciate all the likes you guys leave me, so please go ahead and do so. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well and turn on notifications so you're notified when I put out new content. So right away, man, I guess let's just go ahead and we will get into, let's start with the powers. So the main powers that I use are Sly Flourish. I pretty much use almost all the time. I'm actually starting to use this as one of my main at-wills, even on bosses now, over Duelist Flurry, but I still use Duelist Flurry a lot. Basically, in this build, I do switch out between two builds sometimes, but for most of the time, I'm kind of just sticking with the same build. I tried going back and forth to different loadouts, and you can do more overall damage if you switch between loadouts just for trash and mobs and stuff, but this build right here, I pretty much just stay in permanently now. So for my main at-will, I use Sly Flourish, and then for my secondary at-will, I use Duelist Flurry. As far as my powers that I use Lashing Blade as like your main encounter power to proc Shadow of Demise, and then I also use Impossible to Catch, basically to give you a little bit more extra power, and then I use Smoke Bomb for like the AoE effect, for, you know, mobs and trash and all kinds of other stuff. When it comes to like your actual class features, I use Invisible Infiltrator. It says when you use a daily power, your stealth meter is refilled. For 5 seconds afterwards, your damage is increased by 5%, and at rank 4, it takes that damage increase up to 20%. Infiltrator's action I use as well. It says when you use a daily power, you gain combat advantage for 5 seconds. At rank 4, it goes up to 20 seconds. You should pretty much be at least using a daily once every 20 seconds in this build, so you will have combat advantage against all enemies 100% of the time. Now, as far as it goes with Invisible Infiltrator, it's definitely probably the better choice to use, but I also did play for a while and use Oppressive Darkness, and Oppressive Darkness actually does a really good amount of damage too. And as far as I know, it's probably getting a buff in mod 15. But then again, by the time mod 15 comes around, this build will not be viable, and Trickster Rogues most likely will be completely changed and probably nerfed a ton, which I don't know why, but that's for another video. So those are the main things I use. The dailies that I use all the time are pretty much Whirlwind of Blades as the #1 one, because it says when you whip your daggers out around you, you deal minor damage and you gain power for each enemy you hit. For each enemy you hit up to 5, you will gain 20% power, which means if you hit 5 enemies, you will increase your power by 100%. Another good one that you can use is Lurker's Assault. That will give you more damage, but I primarily only use Whirlwind of Blades. For those of you guys that do like the power looping thing and stuff like that, you can utilize and use that with Courage Breaker. I do use Courage Breaker only if there is one enemy around. It'll give you just a tad bit more power, and it will give the enemy a damage reduction of around 56%, I do believe it is, and it will slow their movement and stuff like that as well. So for dailies, I use Whirlwind of Blades is definitely number one, but for your number two, you know, there's a couple other good ones you can use. You could either use Lurker's Assault, which is very, very good, or you could use Courage Breaker. I switch them up, you know, every once in a while, just depending on how I personally want to play. So those are the powers that I use, and more or less, like, you know, rotation would just be, you know, hit the enemy with a couple swings of Sly to make sure you add the debuff to them. After the debuff is on, sometimes I just go ahead and, you know, hit my smoke bomb. And then let me actually get my action points up really good so I can show you guys like actual rotation. All right, I got my action points up. So more or less what you want to do is if like you're fighting like one enemy, you kind of like, the way I like to do it is I like to start with about one, probably two rotations of Duelist just to apply and stack bleeds. Then make sure I get my Sly Flourish, make sure I do that. Just one rotation. I'm showing you guys multiple rotations here as I'm talking, but just one rotation, 4 hits. After that is done, what I like to do is hit Stealth, Impossible to Catch, my Whirlwind of Blades, Stealth again, Lashing Blade, Smoke Bomb, and then just either go back to using my at-wills, either Duelist Fury or Sly Flourish. It doesn't really make a difference, you know, which one you use. They're both pretty good. So that's just basically the powers I use. Now let's go ahead and get into the feat section. This is the feats I use. On the heroic feats, I have 5 points into action advantage, giving me 10% additional action points for dealing combat advantage damage. Before we go into this, I do want to let you guys know as far as races go. Now, there's a couple different races you can use. I use the Dragonborn race because I like just having the extra 3% critical strike. It helps me round out my stats more. Plus, you get 3% more power. It's not that big of a difference. Another really, really good class to use, race to use is a Tiefling because you will get an extra 5% crit severity. I tried that out for a while and it worked very well. And another good class you could use is a Human Being, where you can get 3 extra heroic feat points. But I'm using a Dragonborn, so I use 5 points in action advantage. I use 1 point in weapon mastery. Every point increases your critical chance by 1%, so I got 1% coming there. I use 3 points in toughness, so it increases my maximum hit points by 9%. I use 3 points in cunning ambusher, which I do 6% more damage for 6 seconds after leaving stealth. Then I have 3 points in Endless Assault. Your encounter powers deal 6% more damage. Then I have 3 points in Disciple of Strength. You increase the amount of bonus damage strength gives you by 6%. And then I have 2 points into Scoundrel Training. Your at-will powers deal, for me, we're having 2 points at 6% more damage to foes not targeting you. So those are the heroic ones that I use. As far as Paragon paths, I went into Master Infiltrator, and Master Infiltrator, I selected the Executioner Paragon. I have 5 points in Arterial Cut. It increases your critical severity by 15% while in stealth. I have 5 points into Vicious Pursuit. When you deal damage, your target takes 5% more damage from you for 6 seconds. I have 5 points into Dying Breath. When a nearby foe dies, you gain Dying Breath, which increases your run speed and your critical severity by 25%. I have Death Knell. You deal 25% more damage to foes below 30%, 5 points in that. I have 5 points into Last Moments. You deal 25% more damage to foes who are below 40% health. This threshold is increased to 70% while you're in stealth. Then I have 1 point into Shadow of Demise, which is our main capstone. It's how we basically do most of our damage, so you definitely want to be running that. And then I have, in the Scoundrel Paragon, I have 5 points into Bloody Brawler. It increases my lifesteal by 2.5%. I have 5 points into Press the Advantage. Your Impossible to Catch now also increases your power rating by 10%. And I have 5 points into Back Alley Tactics. This is one of the best, if not the best feats we have. It says when your action point is empty, you deal up to 25% more damage. This bonus diminishes as you gain action points. So pretty much as soon as you use your daily, you're going to be doing 25% more damage for about a second, you know, your main hit of your Lashing Blade. And then as your action points fill up, you'll start to do less damage up to as low as 5% more. So that's the feats that I use. Let's go ahead and get into Boons. Guild Stronghold. I use offense, I use the power. Defense, I use the hit points. Utility, I just use the mount speed bonus. It really doesn't make a difference which you use in this section. Sometimes I use the XP boon as well. PvP, I don't PvP, so just whatever the hell your guild has unlocked, really, just throw something on if you like. PvP campaign, I don't PvP, so I have nothing. Sharandar, I use Dark Fey Hunter, Fey Precision, Elven Haste, Elven Ferocity, and Elvish Fury. Dread Ring, I use Keeper's Strength, Evoker's Thirst, Forbidden Piercing, Shadow Touch, and Rampaging Madness. Icewind Dale, I use Encroaching Tactics, Appreciation of Warmth, Sleet Skills, Cold Shoulder, and Winter's Bounty. For the Underdark, I use Primordial Might, Primordial Focus, Drow Ambush Tactics, Dwarven Stamina, and Abyssal Strikes. For the Tyranny of Dragons, I use Dragon's Claws, Dragon's Gaze, Draconic Armor Breaker, Dragon's Greed, and then I have all 3 points into Dragon's Fury, allowing me to get up to the 8% max increased critical severity. For the Maze Engine, I use Abyssal Regeneration, Demonic Influence, Demonic Swiftness, and Baphomet's Might. For the Elemental Evil, I use Wave of Force, Heart of Stone, Searing Aggression, and Wall of Wind. For the Storm King's Thunder campaign, I use Cold Hearted, Survival Instincts, Icy Wrath, and Vengeful Heat. And in the main capstone, I have all 3 points going in to Chill of Winter. For the Cloaked Ascendancy, these are some of the worst boons in the entire game. Some of them are goods, but most of them are really bad. I use Aura of Hope. Doesn't really make a difference which one you use in the first set. They basically don't do anything. The second one, definitely use Fiery Frenzy. The third one, I use Soothing Zephyr for more recovery. And the final one, I use Aberrant Power. These final 4 up here, whatever one you pick, it really don't even make a difference. Neither of these boons is any good, and they don't really do anything. For the Jungles of Chult, I have 3 points into Tyrant's Terror to get the max amount of power and hit points. I have another 3 points into Fight, Not Flight, to get an extra 1,000 deflex and an extra 1,600 hit points. Then I have 1 point into Soul Siphon, and then I have 1 point into Lingering Curse, because those proc pretty much all the time, both of these together. Then for Ravenloft, I have 3 points into Undying Death. You gain 15% increased damage versus undead. Then I have 1 point into Bloodlust. Every critical hit against an enemy has a chance to add a stack. At 10 stacks, gain 2,400 increased power for 10 seconds. Can only be applied once every 60 seconds, which is lame. So that is my boons that I use. As far as companions go, I made a video about companions in the past, about the 5 best companions. I'm still using the exact same companions. Your active summon companion you want to be using is the Chultan Tiger. When you have your Chultan Tiger, you want to have some good gear on it. What I use is I use 3 Bonding Runestones at rank 14. I use 2 Bronzewood Raid Rings, and I use 1 Heroic Necklace of the Companion plus 4. As far as the enchantments that I have on my companion, on my rings, and on my necklace, I use all Black Ice rank 14 enchantments. So I have 2 Black Ice there, 2 Black Ice there, and 2 Black Ice rank 14s there. As far as the other companions I use a legendary Air Archon, a legendary Razorwood, a legendary Earth Archon, and a legendary Aranis of Belial. So those are my 5 legendary companions that I have. As far as mounts go, the mount combat power I use, you can only get an actual combat power if you have a legendary mount. I use the Bat Swarm combat power. Now, if you don't have a legendary mount, obviously you won't have nothing to put here. If you have a legendary mount, just use whatever it is you have. The best one you can possibly use will be either the Bat Swarm or the Tyrannosaurus Rex one, with the Tenzer's Disc being third. As far as equip power, I use the Coastal Flail Snail, the legendary Coastal Flail Snail equip power, which is called Quick Action. It says, using a daily power grants 25% of your total action points over 10 seconds. This, in my opinion, is absolutely best in slot for an equip power, and I do believe the Bat Swarm is absolutely best in slot for a combat power for Trickster Rogues as well. Obviously, movement, I'm using the fastest one, the 140%. I do have 3 legendary mounts. I do have the Coastal Flail Snail, which I use that one's equip power. I also have the Bat Swarm, which I use that one's combat power, and I also do have a Tensor's Floating Disc, which I do not even use anymore, and I wish there was some way I could unbind it so I could sell it, but that is what it is. As far as my stable goes, with the 5 mounts I use and my insignias, I use Artificer's Persuasion. When you use an artifact, receive a buff. I use Cavalry's Warning. When you use a Mont combat power, receive a buff. I use Assassin's Covenant. I use Protector's Camaraderie, and I use Magistrate's Patience. Now, some of these ones you definitely want to use, like Artificer's Persuasion, Cavalry's Warning, Assassin's Covenant, Protector's Camaraderie. I think that those 4 I would always be using. You don't necessarily have to use Magistrate's Patience. You could swap that out for something else if you desire. Maybe Gladiator's Guile if you want some more movement speed or whatever. But I like to use Magistrate's Patience because I just like to do as much damage as I can, and so I pick ones that will give me more damage. As far as the insignias I use, pretty much almost all of my insignias are the insignias of aggression, because I try to stack my armor penetration with my mounts. If I am using a insignia that is not of aggression, it is of skill, and the only reason I would use it is because they do not make an insignia of aggression. For instance, right now, like I'm using 2 barbed insignia of aggressions on this medium tiger, and I'm using an enlightened insignia of skill. But they do not make an enlightened insignia of aggression, so I used a skill one for a little bit more critical strike. So in here I have 2 aggression, 1 skill, 3 aggression in this Arcanian Horse, 2 skill and 1 aggression in this Apparatus of Qualish. I have 2 skill and 1 aggression in the Disc, and then I have 3 aggressions in the Coastal Flail Snail, and those are the mount bonuses that I am using. Alright, so we covered my mounts, we covered mount bonuses, we covered companions, we covered boons, we covered feats, we've covered powers. Let's talk real quickly about gear. As far as the headpiece goes, I used the Bandit Lord's Raid Hat. I do believe that this is still best in slot right now in Mod 14. Well, it actually just came out in Mod 14, but I do definitely think that it's the best in slot piece to use in Mod 14. Gives you a ton of critical strike, which is good to balance out your stats. I have it reinforced with plus 200 armor penetration. And as far as armor goes, I used a Fury Kimono of the Bear. Your melee powers do 3% more damage. It is still best in slot. For arms, I used a Terror Grip. Your encounter powers do 3% more damage. These are best in slot right now for Mod 14 for Trickster Rogues. And for feet, I use the Heels of Fury. Your melee powers do 3% more damage, which now does correctly stack with the Fury Kimono of the Bear. I have plus 200 armor penetration reinforced on each one of these items. As far as my main hand and my offhand, currently right now I'm using the Primal set. I have the offhand only exalted, and the main hand is not exalted. I actually plan on switching over to the Sunset, the new Sun set, as soon as I get everything I need for it. I currently have the main hand completely done, but I'm still a couple Witchwoods and Sunset Shards away from getting the offhand being able to restore. Once I get those restored, I am going to be switching over to the Sun weapons. It's just my personal preference. I'm not seeing the primal response proc as much as it used to now that I have a lot more hit points and I have a lot more deflection. And I think they changed some stuff with it. So I'm going to go ahead and start using the Sunset set. Plus, I'm pretty much mostly trying to play Castle Ravenloft anyway. It's mostly the dungeon I'm running. Let's go ahead and talk about neck. The neck, I used the Baphomet's Infernal Talisman for the set, and the set I'm obviously using is for the Demogorgon set, which includes the Baphomet's Infernal Talisman and the Demogorgon's Girdle of Might, as well as the Shard of Orcus Wand artifact. That is still the best set to run for a Trickster Rogue in Mod 14, unfortunately, because the set is so old now. It's literally a legendary set, and it has an item level of 405. There is still not anything better than this set, so unfortunately, we still have to use it. As far as rings go, I am using the Ring of the Shadow Stalker +4. I would love to get a Ring of the Shadow Stalker +5 Legendary, but I have never been able to get it. The left ring I'm using is the Ring of Offensive Action. When you use a daily power, your damage is increased by 3% for 5 seconds. So I'm using that. There are rings out there, obviously, that have higher item level, but they are not as good. So don't let item level fool you. Having the highest item level doesn't always mean you are using the best gear. Because, you know, you can obviously use a ring here that'll give you 510 item level, but it's not going to be as good as the Ring of Offensive Action. Just kind of like the Feared Kiono of the Bear. It's still best in slot for us, but it only has an item level of 480. You know, same like how I just talked about the neck and the waist only have an item level of 405. They are still best in slot for us. As far as the shirt goes, I'm using the upper primal paints, and the pants I'm using the lower primal paints. Artifacts that I use the Thyan Book of the Dead. I use the Lantern of Revelation. Obviously, I use the Shard of Orcus Wand. And I use the Soul Sight Crystal. Those are my main artifacts. This is my main artifact that I use pretty much all the time. When I do randomly switch loadouts, sometimes when I do switch, I use the Decanter of Atropal Essence. And I'll show you guys that in a little bit. As far as enchantments go, for utility slots, I pretty much just use Dark Enchantments for more movement. So currently I have a Dark Enchantment rank 11 in there. I have in this thing a Dark Enchantment rank 12. In the feet, I have a Dark Enchantment rank 11. In the waist, I have a Dark Enchantment rank 11. You catch the drift. As far as overload slots, I made a video about this a couple days ago if you guys watched it. The ones that I most likely use all the time are the Mark of the Demon Slayers and the Mark of the Undead Slayers, rank 1 and 2. I still have some left over, so I just use them all the time. But most of the time, I'm just trying to use these ones up right now. I'd say 95% of the time, the overload enchantments I'm using are the Greater Red Dragon Glyphs to get increased armor penetration and that increased damage per every hit. As far as an armor enchantment goes, you have a couple options in here. Basically, not one of them is going to be like a completely best in slot one. You have like 3 ones that are just really, really good, and it's completely up to you which one you want to use. I personally use the Eclipse enchantment, and I only have it at pure right now, but I will be upgrading it in the future, and this is for me to get more deflection chance. You could also use the Bark Shield enchantment, which is very, very good. You could also use the Negation enchantment, or you could even use the Soul Forge enchantment. Shit, I mean, pretty much any 4 of those defense enchantments is going to work well for you. So, pretty much just pick whatever one that you like the most. Me, personally, I like the Eclipse enchantment. As far as the weapon enchantment goes, I've been using so many of these over the past month, you have no idea. When it comes down to it, there's a lot of viable ones. The Fey Touch is probably going to be best in slot. It will probably give you the most damage with the right group. You have to have like the meta group for it to really work, the right buffs, so on and so forth. But the Fey Touch is probably overall going to give you the most damage against single target. The Vorpal, an unparalleled Vorpal, is still a very, very, very good weapon enchantment to use. It's only really about a 4 or 5% difference maximum between a Fey Touch that unparalleled. Me personally, excuse me. Me personally, I've tried them all. I even tried the Prominence. I really did like the Prominence enchantment a lot, and I'm thinking about going back to that in the future. But me personally, I have stuck now, and I'm going to be using the Unparalleled Lightning enchantment. And the reason why I like to use the Lightning enchantment is a couple reasons. First of all, I just really like the way it looks. At the end of the day, you want to have fun with the game, and I just really like the way the lightning arcs out to enemies and stuff. I think it looks really cool. But at the same point, it does do a lot of damage now, and it does give you a lot of cooldown. One of the main reasons I like to use it is because of the cooldown reduction for the lightning strikes. It helps me get my encounters back very quickly. And it also does a ton of damage to mobs and trash. Lightning enchantment still is by far the best enchantment to use for multiple enemies, for mobs and stuff like that. And I know that Trickster Rogue's main focus is supposed to be on single target and killing bosses and blah blah blah. But a lot of the times I'm running content by myself, I'm doing stuff by myself, I don't have a whole team, and, you know, I like to clear mobs and trash as fast as possible, so I like to use the lightning enchantment. Like I said, in this slot though, you can easily use the Fey Touched. If you can't afford the Fey Touch, you can use the Vorpal, you can use the lightning enchantment. It's completely up to you. You're not going to see a humongous big difference in damage between any of the upper tier weapon enchantments. I like the Unparalleled Lightning enchantment because dungeons are not just derived of only bosses. There's tons of mobs in them as well. So I like doing the extra damage to mobs. And then when it is single target, they did buff its weapon damage up as well. So the lightning enchantment does a lot of weapon damage against single targets as well. So those are the things that I'm using. As far as enchantments go, in all of my offensive slots, every single offensive slot, I use a Black Ice enchantment, just like on my companion, trying to get as much power, critical strike, and recovery as I possibly can. I only have all of mine at like rank 13, as you can see. There's not one in there, but there's one in here. Though that's my defense one, but on all my offensive slots, I use Black Ice. And I'm going to hopefully get those up to rank 14, except for right here. I'm still using a Radiant Enchantment rank 14 because it was the free one I got when I came back to the game. As far as defensive enchantments go, I use a mixture. I have a Dark Enchantment in here, rank 14 for some more lifesteal. And I have a Dark Enchantment in here, a rank 13, which I will be getting to 14 for more lifesteal. And then in my offhand, I have a Radiant Enchantment at rank 13 for more hit points. Once I get all those ranked up to 14 and get all my things ranked up to 14, whenever that may be, it'll balance out my stats very well, and I can start moving some things around and so on and so forth. Let's talk about stats. Really at endgame, what you want to have is you want to have 100% critical hit chance, and you want to have 100% armor penetration. So when your companion is attacking, like, you know, obviously my companion is right now, you want to have around 100% of each. And you can see mine are critical chance shows 89.8. The way I get that up to near 100% is I use the Wildstorm Elixir, and I also use, here, I'll show you guys. I use the Wildstorm Elixir, and I also use the Squash Suit. That puts my critical chance up to about 94.2%, I believe. And then once my Baphomet's Might Boon procs, which it does pretty much like 95% of the time, that gets me up like another 5%, so I go up to like 99.6% or 99.8% critical chance. As far as armor penetration goes, I'm probably a little bit over right now. Well, it depends on where I actually put my overloads, because usually when I use, see, right now I'm at 99.8 defenses ignored, and when I use the Greater Red Dragon Glyph Overload enchantments, that takes my defenses ignored up to 104%, so I am going to get rid of some of the armor penetration insignias from my mounts in the future. I just haven't really done it yet. But mostly what you really want to be aiming for is 100% critical chance, absolutely number one, 100% critical, 100% armor penetration or defenses ignored. And then the rest, you want to just try to get as much recovery as you can. I think around 10 to 12,000 recovery is more than enough. And then everything else, you pretty much just want to stack in to power if you could. As far as like defensive stats go, I want to get my deflection chance to 50%, which is currently at like 45.7, but once I upgrade my enchantment, it'll go higher, my Eclipse enchantment. And I want to get my lifesteal to about 12, to in between 12 and 15%. And right now it's at 12.7. Once I upgrade that other rank 13 dark, it'll probably take me up to a 13% lifesteal chance, and that should be more than enough. Alright, so we got all of that out the way. We talked about stats. One thing I forgot to mention as well, as far as like artifact powers on your main hand, you could use Duelist Flurry, or you can use Sly Furish. It's up to you. I'm probably going to be using Sly when I switch out to the Sun set, because I mostly use Sly more now than Duelist. And as your offhand goes, you want to be using Infiltrator's Action on your offhand bonus for the extra 5% damage pretty much 100% of the time, because you're going to have that up. And then I use Combat Advantage bonus for a little bit extra combat advantage as well. So, You've seen all my gear. You've seen my stats. You've seen my powers. You've seen my feats. You've seen my boons. You've seen my companions. You've seen my mounts. Now I guess I'll show you guys. Oh yeah, other things I forgot to not cover is on my bottom potion tray, I use the empowered chain of scales to get a little bit extra buff there. I also use on my right D-pad, I use just to get something else that does damage, I use this thing called a doohickey, and you pretty much shoot it out right there, and it does like damage. You could just see it does damage to all enemies like in a little radius. Usually does anywhere from like 8 to 20,000 damage, has a 30-second cooldown. It's just kind of like another, I guess you could say, little encounter power once every 30 seconds that'll help you get a little bit more damage. You can pick those up pretty cheaply from the auction house at around 40,000 astral diamonds. You can get them. So I use that. As far as foods go, the foods I always use, and I made a video about this a couple weeks ago, Invocation Blessing, Wildstorm Elixir, Squash Soup, and then I used different potions. Like for this one, I'll use Force right now. And those are probably always the main 4 things I'll use. Now, as far as an actual real rotation, when you use like, you know, your combat power and your artifacts and everything, the way I like to do it, like I said, once again, I'll show you guys. If we're talking about a boss fight here, I like to go up, I like to stack at least 1, maybe 2 stacks of bleed on them. So 2 stacks of bleed first. Then after that's done, 4 swings with Sly Furish to make sure you stack the debuff. 3, 4. So once that's on there, it'll have a debuff on it for 15 seconds. Then after that's done, I like to hit my Bat Swarm, then my Artifact, then Stealth, Impossible to Catch, Stealth again, Whirlwind of Blades, and then the Lashing Blade and Smoke Bomb. You'll see it. I'll pretty much try to go through one right here. So, Duelist Fury, apply 2 stacks of bleed real fast. Then hit my Sly Furish, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll probably even hit my Smoke Bomb, Bat Swarm, Artifact, Impossible to Catch, Whirlwind, Stealth, Lashing Blade, and then just wail on them again with Duelist Fury, whatnot. And then boom, Shadow Demise. That hit was for like 6,528,000 on these test dummies. And then, oh, I didn't even have my Empowered Chain of Scales up. So, yeah, and then just like kind of gain back your action points again. Now, if you don't have your combat power up, or if you don't have a combat power, and your artifact is on cooldown, same exact thing though. You know, you want to try to apply maybe 1 or 2 stacks of bleed. So 1 there, 2 here, then 4 hits of Sly, 1, 2, 3, 4, Stealth, Impossible to Catch, Whirlwind of Blades, Stealth again, Lashing Blade, squeeze your Smoke Bomb in there somewhere, I just did it there, and then just wail on them with either Duelist or Sly Furish at the same time. So that's pretty much just kind of like, you know, the rotation I always use. And I kind of use this rotation on whether it be bosses or not bosses. Like I said, I used to swap out my loadouts a lot, but I stopped doing that. And if I did swap out my loadouts, I would swap out to the exact same kind of thing, but here's my loadout now. The only thing changed is my powers. I use Dazing Strike, and then I use Smoke Bomb and Blade Flurry. This will do more damage against, you know, mobs and trash and multiple targets and whatnot. And then as far as my artifact goes, I use the Decanter of Atropal Essence, which will give you a damage buff as well as a damage hit to everything. So, you know, you can obviously use that and then, you know, use all the different, you know, Blade Flurry, Smoke Bomb, Dazing Strike things. But that's really if you like to switch out and utilize different things. Like I said, this will give you more damage against mobs and stuff. But at the same time, most of the times when I run with groups, my main DPS when I use with the Impossible to Catch and everything and Lashing Blade, it just melts stuff all the time anyway. So it's just, I kind of like don't even change it up anymore. So I don't believe that I missed anything in here. And if I did, you guys just ask me a question. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything, just leave it in the comment section. You guys know I do my best to read and respond to people in my comments. So If there's anything I missed or if there's anything you'd want to know, then leave a comment, question, anything like that down below. So I think I've covered pretty much everything of what I use and the whole nine and everything I'm spec'd into right now. So anyway, man, I hope for you Trickster Rogues, I did maybe help you guys out some, helping you with your build and whatnot. Like I said, in Mod 15, we're getting a ton of changes, so who knows what's going to happen to Trickster Rogues. Nothing's official yet, but we shall see. If you guys did enjoy this video, man, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up like button. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, man, please go ahead and make sure you hit that subscribe button. And then make sure you watch all my other Neverwinter videos as well, because I have tons of different Neverwinter videos in my Neverwinter playlist on my YouTube channel. So anyway, YouTube, this is the Assist Man. And until next time, I am out.